You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. And you're listening to a special edition of Sox in the Basement, getting you ready for the MLB draft and trying to figure out exactly who the White Sox are going to pick third overall. You heard a snippet of a very long conversation with James Fox of Future Sox and The Loop Sports. He's a regular here on the show. We love James. He's also very insightful. And while on the last episode I put some of that in there, there's enough for an entire show with James. So a little bit of this you might have heard before, but there's a lot more to get into as we try to figure out what the White Sox are going to do with the third overall pick in the MLB draft and how it's going to shake out. And so without further ado, let's get to the full interview with James. Let's nerd out about pick number 3. It's Sox in the Basement, found everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com.
Sox in the Basement. Sox in the Basement. Sox in the Basement.
James Fox is on the phone line with us. He's our good friend. He's been with us almost since the beginning. He writes for Future Sox, and he also writes from time to time for The Loop Sports.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk draft, and I've been waiting on purpose because we've had so many people ask, are we going to do something to preview the draft? And I was like, I want to wait till we get close because things change.
They do.
Not a lot has changed, though, I don't think, with the first 4 picks. Take me through the last couple of months. What new thing has happened with these 4 guys that seem to be up at the top right now if I look at MLB Pipeline? And I remember them being up at the top, I thought a month or so ago when I looked at it, in Rutschman, Witt Jr., Vaughn, and Abrams.
Yeah, so I think it's similar names. I think if somebody drops it's going to be Andrew Vaughn, and I wrote an article in the past about how the Sox were in a good spot because they get to pick between one of the top 3 guys, and they've been super college heavy lately. So you think like Rutschman, Vaughn, and Bobby Witt Jr., who's a lot of people's second best player, obviously, like after Rutschman. But it sounds like Vaughn, if the Sox do what I think we're going to talk about here tonight, and what it's like rumored that they're going to do, I think Vaughn might fall a little bit, actually. So that's kind of up in the air. So this next week could be interesting as far as like where he actually ends up, and we can talk about some of the reasons why he might be dropping just a little anyways.
Well, tell me this first of all, because Adley Rutschman is the guy that everybody's saying a catcher is the number 1. But what's interesting is, and I want to address this, we'll get this right off the bat, He's supposed to go number 1 overall, but every mock draft has Bobby Witt Jr. going second, no matter what. And it's almost as though people believe that if Rutschman doesn't get drafted number 1 overall, if for some reason there's a surprise, he isn't going 2. They're sold on Witt Jr. He'll be available at 3. Is that a good way to assess the rumors that are coming out right now that if he doesn't get picked number 1 overall, he could be sitting for the Sox at 3?
Yeah, I think that's actually makes sense. I would actually say that the 2 most likely names for the White Sox at 3 are C.J. Abrams, the high school shortstop out of Georgia, and Adley Rutschman. Now, I don't know what to believe. Like the Baltimore thing is weird, and that's Mike Elias, who was the scouting director, I believe, for the Astros, but he definitely worked for the Astros, and he was one of the guys who unearthed Carlos Correa, like out of Puerto Rico, back when, Carlos Correa was mentioned as like a top 10 guy in that draft, but he wasn't necessarily supposed to go 1. And the Astros kind of made some of that game playing up at the top of the draft famous, where, they get a good player, but maybe not a guy that's going to take like your entire bonus pool amount, and then you could like spread more money out throughout the rest of the draft. Now, there's some thought that Baltimore might try to do that. But I mean, Rutschman might be the best number 1 overall since Bryce Harper. So while he might not totally fit their window, because he's probably going to be in the majors in 18 months and they're still going to be really bad by then, I think it's kind of tough to pass on that guy, but it is interesting. I mean, the only way like you were saying, like he could fall to the Sox. Now it depends on who goes 1 though. Like if they pass on Rutschman at 1, but they take Bobby Witt, then I think Rutschman goes 2.
Right.
But, if they
but it seems like the Royals. It seems like the Royals are all about Witt, right?
Yeah, the Royals are taking Bobby Witt. I think unless he goes 1. Yeah. So I think he's going 1, which kind of like a lot of people have like Rutschman, Witt 1, 2. So they're not even talking about Witt to the Sox. Like I personally think the Sox would take Witt, but I don't think he's going to be there. And I think they know that too. I mean, this is like basically signed, sealed, and delivered to Kansas City.
Right. Okay, so Rutschman he's the prize, but we're hoping that Baltimore does something different. Now, if for some reason he slipped, and then we'll get into the debate amongst the guys at 3, if for some reason he slips, how does that, explain it to everybody out there that doesn't understand, the signing money and how it gets used. How does that affect the White Sox? I mean, first of all, they could still pay him, right? There's no chance he sits there and says, well, I went to 3, I'm not, they could still pay him and they could still do what they want to do, right? If they go get him? Yeah,
they can pay him. I mean, it might affect a little bit what they do the rest of the draft just because, so like their first round pick is like just over $7 million. I think if Rutschman goes 1, I think the Orioles are going to try to get him as cheap as possible, but if you're him, like, there's absolutely no reason for him to take a discount at 1. So the Orioles can pay him like a little bit over $8 million. Even if like he went 3 and the Sox had to get closer to that 8 number, they can do it. It might affect another pick down the road, but like you'd have Adley Rutschman, so who cares? You know? So yeah, no. So it won't be a scenario where it's like, oh no, we can't pay the bonus amount or whatever. They'll do it. They'll get it done. It might change like their overall strategy a little bit, but I mean, I think they would get that done. He doesn't fall farther than 3, and that would be, it would kind of be the euphoric feeling of like when they got Carlos Rodon, and we've all seen how that's worked out.
If he wouldn't have had so many injuries,
Yeah, and that wasn't supposed to happen either, So and that was also a Mike Elias front office that that passed on Carlos Rodon that year. So. I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely. I think he's going 1. But
I know, but you're giving me hope.
At least it offers it. There is a pathway for it to happen. And the other thing I will say about that is like Houston typically, like they don't decide on their pick until like an hour before the draft. And obviously this is Baltimore, so it's a little bit different. But if he takes some of those same philosophies with him, like we might have no idea until next Monday.
All right, let's talk about the 2 guys that I've heard the most about that would go to the White Sox at 3 and who it's going to be between. We got Andrew Vaughn at first base. We have C.J. Abrams, who's a shortstop. Vaughn is a college player. Abrams is a high school player. The White Sox have only taken 2 high school players, correct me if I'm wrong, since the turn of this century, and neither one of them worked out for them. Does that affect them when they're making a pick? Do you think that this front office is like, we don't do well with this, let's just take the safe pick in college?
I don't think it can. I think they've obviously been more risk averse lately, and they've went on the college side. Now I think I'll preface this by saying like this is the 4th year under Nick Hostetler's reign. He while he was in the organization, like he's added a lot of new scouts, and there's people in different jobs. So when people go back and they point to Courtney Hawkins and they point to Carson Fulmer and they're destined to like pick somebody that's pretty bad. I don't really buy into that, and I also think it's too early to really like criticize any of his picks the last 3 years. Look, you can look at some of them and say like Zach Collins, Jake Berger. There's been some issues, but it is still too early to make any determinations there. So when Nick Hostetler took over this job, he said he really liked high school players. When he worked for the Braves, that's like what he did. So I actually thought they were going to start taking high school players a lot sooner, but he also said that they needed to insulate this system. They needed to add baseball players to the White Sox farm system because the system was so bad that they needed like a base of players. And we've talked about this in the past where, their system in spots lacks high upside, but I think there's a lot of big leaguers in the system. So, those guys are also tradable down the road. So I think it's time. I think it's time to go younger, and I think that's what they're going to do. He also said to James Fagan in one of his athletic pieces that, last year you got to see the personality of the scouting department a little bit. They did take 5 or 6 high school guys last year. and it was kind of a break from like the recent norm there. So no, I don't think they'll be scared. I think fans are going to freak out, but they can't be scared by the premium athlete, I don't think.
Talk me off of the ledge slightly on this, because I always like the idea of middle infielders. So I would always tend to go towards a guy like Abrams. But that said, even though Vaughn supposedly runs like he's got a piano on his back and grades out to be basically just a first baseman unless we get lucky he can move over to third, and that's the most I've read about him, the one thing about him is he's going to hit. That he rates out really high as a hitter, and every scout says no matter what you say about him, he's going to get to the major leagues, he's going to hit, and he's going to hit for power. He seems pretty short, at least on the batting side of things. Am I wrong? Have you heard about holes in his game that would make that wrong? Because I mean, there's a lot less questions, it seems like, with him, and we're the team that's dealing with weird injuries and guys that don't work out as much as we want them to right now. Talk me off the ledge here, because I keep thinking that Vaughn probably should be number 3.
Yeah, so Vaughn is very, very safe because I think he's going to hit, but he's under 6 feet tall and he's right-handed, and he's a first baseman. So those guys don't go this high. Like Andrew Vaughn can completely mash. I mean, his offensive profile has been, like it's similar to Chris Bryant. Now, it's at first base. So then it comes into question, do you take a first baseman with a pick that high? And that's, I think, so Jim Callis of MLB Pipeline has kind of said the White Sox are looking for up-the-middle players. So I guess the one good thing about C.J. Abrams would be if he doesn't stick in his primary position, which is shortstop. He's a Gold Glove caliber defender in center field, whereas some of the first-rounders they've taken lately who have had defensive concerns, well, those defensive concerns push them to first base or push them to designated hitter. So if you're secondary option is Gold Glove center fielder, that's not a bad option. Now I understand, you take 18-year-olds, there's a lot of risk there, but there's also a lot more time to figure it out. We've seen with some of the Jake Bergers and Zach Collinses, you take these guys and they're supposed to be quick to the majors and they're safer, but if anything goes wrong at all, you're looking at debuting at 24, 25 years old, where with some of this high school talent, it's just not really like that. So I think this is the time. I think Andrew Vaughn, if they take Andrew Vaughn next Monday night, I'm going to be super happy about it, because I think Andrew Vaughn, similarly to Rutschman, could be up in 18 months and sitting in the middle of your order somewhere. Is it the best use of resources, though? I don't know. I mean, you're not planning on picking this high again. Theoretically, you should be able to sign or draft a first baseman when you're good, if you don't have one. Can you get a C.J. Abrams? I don't know if you can. So, and I also think C.J., not that anybody thinks that you're making this pick in order to trade it. I think C.J. Abrams has more value in the future. I mean, you're looking at a guy who, could be a top 10 prospect in the sport, for multiple years coming if he turns into what they think he can.
Is there any chance, because he's in high school, that he decides that I'm going to go to college? I mean, is there any whisper of that for anybody that's not paying attention to this as closely, where the guy could get drafted and be like, I want to go to university or whatever?
Yeah, no, not this high. I mean, he's got a full ride to Alabama, I believe, and a full ride to baseball ride, so it's not really a full ride. He's going to get $6 million, so he's going pro. I mean, there's some signability question, guys. One of the big things with the baseball draft is when those guys get taken in the top 3 rounds, they sign, because teams aren't stupid. It's not like you draft a guy and then you're sitting there till August 15th trying to negotiate. You got deals done. So there's a lot of times where if you're watching the baseball draft or you're following it, best player available isn't always a thing, because it's kind of who you can sign. I mean, you might have the 15th rated player on the board still sitting there in round 3. Well, the reason for that is that guy might want $4 million, and you're going to find out that he's going to school.
Right.
That stuff happens all the time. But no, I mean, with Abrams, with Witt, even with Riley Green out of Florida, I believe those guys are all signing.
Is there a wild card besides the 4 that I just mentioned that you think the Sox could do? Could they look at pitching again, which they tend to do in the first round? Is there any way that they go for somebody other than these 4 guys that we talked about at the top?
I don't think so at 3. Now, I don't know what you've watched so Nick Hostetler was on 670 this weekend with Matt Spiegel, and they were talking about how they have 6 guys. Why they need 6 guys when they have the 3rd pick is beside me, but
that's like me ranking 30 quarterbacks in fantasy football when I'm never going to get to that.
Yeah, right. So, he did laugh about it and say, the biggest thing is they need to rank the top 3 properly, which I agree with. But he said that they met with 6 players. He said they met with one of them is a college pitcher. The only thing they're not considering is a high school pitcher. So I think Nick Lodolo out of Texas Christian is that guy, lefty starter out of TCU. I don't think he's an option at 3 though. There's just too many good players. One of them's going to be there.
I look at his scouting here. His rate, he rates out 55 at fastball, slider, and changeup and control. He's like just straight across the board, just sitting at that number. I think when you look at the guys that are sitting up there that we mentioned in the top 4, I might be disappointed if they go and get him unless he turns out to be a star. That'd be something I remember. Remember when we had a chance these other guys? You didn't make that pick? That'd be one of those that would stand out at me, I think.
Yeah, for sure. He's like a number 3 starter. You're talking, if I had to mock it out right now, I think he probably goes 7 to the Reds, and he might go a little bit later than that. That's one of the weak points in this draft is the college pitching, because I think the past couple of years, the way the bonus pools have been, and there's been a lot of money to spend, a lot of high school pitchers have just gone pro, out of high school. So your college crop isn't as good. Now, for a team like the White Sox who likes to add pitching, and they've gotten guys later, in rounds 5 through 10, I think there's pitching. But if you want to take one with a high pick, there's not.
No, there's not a lot up there. After you get through Rutschman and Witt Jr. and Vaughn and Abrams, after that, the next 3 guys that are rated out that are the highest ones, at least, the consensus thing that you're getting are 3 outfielders, and then you're running into to Lodolo, and then after that, after that now, there's no way that any of those guys compare to what you would get at 3. So to me, it seems like you're not going to go out and get another outfielder. You're not going to get that pitcher for the same reason that you just said. So we're really talking about the big 4 right here. Do you see Witt Jr. as for some reason, some strange reason, the Orioles do something really weird, and then somehow the Royals decide that they want Rutschman, and Witt Jr. falls to Bobby Witt Jr. falls to the White Sox. Is that the pick? Is he clearly above Abrams if that happens?
Yeah, I think definitely if it's Vaughn that say Vaughn took $5 million or something to go number 1, and for whatever reason Kansas City loved Witt but wasn't expecting Rutschman to be there, and they pull the trigger on Rutschman. I think the Sox would take Witt at 3, but I guess that's Witt being there at 3 is the one scenario that nobody's really talking about. I think now it's kind of, if Rutschman falls, it's a dream scenario. You take him. If not, I think everybody's kind of expecting C.J. Abrams at this point. Even some rival scouting departments, from what I've been told, are expecting the White Sox to take Abrams at 3. But look, if the Sox operation gets on a clock at 3 and they end up changing course and going with the college hitter, I don't think anybody would be super surprised by that, and I don't think anybody would be upset either, with Vaughn or Abrams. I think more people are going to be upset if they take Abrams, honestly, because people are afraid, just because of the past. People are afraid because of Courtney Hawkins. They're afraid because of some of your other guys, but they completely disregard the fact that this team, somehow they did develop Tim Anderson. Tim Anderson played 1 year at a junior college, and he was as raw as it gets. C.J. Abrams has been playing baseball his entire life. He's just young.
When I'm going to tell you something, after listening to you, I probably would rank them right now. After listening to you, I'd probably rank them as Rutschman, Witt Jr., and Abrams. I would probably say that would be my 3 in that order. I listen to the argument that you're making about it, and I sit there and I think, it'd be incredible if you got Adley Rutschman. That'd just be, that's a talent right there. But I've always liked in the middle of the field players where, I've said that. We've said that multiple times on this show that, that's something that you have to get a lot of, because if they don't work out, you can move them to other places. It's not like you could take a first baseman and say, you're going to be a shortstop now. They don't move in that direction. They move in the other direction.
And I see, I've had some stuff on Twitter, too, where we were doing some stuff, and we're talking about C.J. Abrams, and people are just like, they think it's the football draft or something. They're like, where would he play? I'm like, I don't know, shortstop. But what about Tim Anderson? I'm like, I don't know, then center field. But what about Luis Robert? I'm like, that's not the way this works, man. You take the best player. I don't think anybody's ever had too many up the middle players.
Right.
I don't think that's ever happened before. So, like, he could play left, or God forbid, like, in 3 years when he's ready to go, if you have a stud at shortstop and center field already, like, I think they'll find a place for C.J. Abrams to play. Or,
right.
You know what, you trade him.
He'll
or
be
you
a second.
figure it out.
He'll be a second, or he'll be in right, or they'll find some place for him.
So, I mean, it'll be I mean, look, if you would have asked me, if we would have been having this same conversation even 2.5, 3 weeks ago, I would have said it's Vaughn and it's a lock. But I started looking at some stuff, and his numbers aren't as good this year. Like, I disregard a lot of that because he's, one of the only hitters on Cal, and I think he's chasing a little bit. Like, his numbers are still really good. He just, he hit 23 homers his sophomore year and won the Golden Spikes. And, he's paying for that a little bit this year. He also didn't do outstanding in summer leagues with wood bats, and for all these college hitters that the White Sox have been taking, that's one of, like, Hostetler's things, man. Like, all these guys had wood bat success. Steele Walker did, Madrigal did, Collins did, Jake Berger was awesome with wood bats in the summer, and Vaughn was okay. But I think given the opportunity, to get, I just think it's, shortstop, center field profile, 80 grade speed, a bat that's developing. I mean, there's been some scouts that have a 60 future power on Abrams with like a Kenny Lofton comp. I mean,
Man.
comps are crazy,
Yeah.
So I mean, take that for what it is. I mean, I think he's similar. He's a little bit similar to Twins number 1 overall pick Royce Lewis a couple years ago, and Royce Lewis isn't hitting at all in low A. So, I don't know. I mean, it just,
Royce Lewis is going to get there. I haven't lost faith in a guy like Royce Lewis. I've been following him since he got drafted. I still think that guy's going to get there eventually.
And that's the thing, though. And even if they do struggle, what's the floor there, right? I mean, look at Byron Buxton. Byron Buxton was supposed to be a superstar. Byron Buxton is not a superstar, but Byron Buxton is going to play in the league for a long, long time because he plays Gold Glove defense in center field, and he hits a little bit, and he has power. Whereas, if you're a first baseman and you don't hit, there's nowhere else to go from there. There's nowhere else to extract any value if Andrew Vaughn doesn't hit. Now, I'm fairly confident he's going to hit, but what if you break a hamate bone in rookie ball, and then you take a year to get back, and then you finally start raking, but then you get to the big leagues and you're 24 already. It's just the same profile kind of over and over again, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're going to change it up. One other thing on that is Kylie McDaniel, Fangraphs kind of brought up the fact that they might be able to save a little bit of money on Abrams. I don't know how much, because I don't think he would fall further than 6. But I mean, even if he signs for $6.2 million or something, and you can pocket $1 million to use at pick 45, you might be able to get a top 25 talent at 45.
I want to read this to you before I let you go here, okay, James? This is 2 years ago, or not 2 years ago, 3 years ago. The 2016 June amateur draft, okay? These are the top 10 picks. Mickey Moniak, Nick Senzel, Ian Anderson, Riley Pint, Corey Ray, AJ Puck, Braxton Garrett, Cal Quantrill, Matt Manning, Zach Collins. The White Sox picked 10th in that one. There are names in there that did not work out. You can already tell they're not going to work out. This is a crapshoot in a lot of ways. It's not like the NFL draft, like you said earlier. Even, it's good to have that third pick. I saw something recently where it said to the White Sox over the last, I think it was something over the last 10 years or something like that. They have created the most wins above replacement in their first round picks than any other team in Major League Baseball, which shocked me.
Yeah, that was a tweet that I retweeted yesterday. Actually,
okay, I saw it from you.
From a guy named Jeff Fair. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and this is not the easiest thing. There's no such thing as a sure thing they seem to make a pretty okay pick. Even when it doesn't work out, their guys are making it to the major leagues, at least in some way, at least over the last couple of years, or they're listed right now on these high prospect lists. It'll be interesting to see what ends up happening because, like I said, I mean, there's names in here. I can't find them right now. I go look at a prospect list. I can't even find some of these guys on here, and that was just 2016, and they're not in the majors. So it's not always 100% that this is going to work out.
Well, yeah, so that's one of the things. Pretty basically, like I was tweeting out a bunch of stuff and trying to get some stuff going for future Sox, and somebody's like, "Oh, I'm sure whoever they take is going to be terrible because they're bad at drafting in the first round." And I think it's easy to say that when like you live in the prism of like all you watch is the White Sox. Like it's very easy to think like, "Oh, that first round pick sucked. Like they're bad at it." But when you look around baseball, it is incredibly hard. It's just it's they say that it's an inexact science because it is, because they have no idea. And like, I mean, they're not trying to draft bad players, but like, they're kids, and it's like probably the hardest game to play in the world. So that was an interesting tweet. Like he mentioned to me, like, so what he did was he took the Cubs and then the Sox and then the rest of the Sox division over the last, whatever it was, like 10 years, first round picks. The Sox have accumulated the highest amount of WAR. Now, all of that is pretty much Chris Sale and Tim Anderson, so it's Chris Sale's like 45 of that WAR. But still, like when you go to the Indians list, 25 of it is Francisco Lindor and 40 of the Cubs is Chris Bryant. I mean, it's the same way for everybody. It's not like everybody's drafting these guys that have accumulated 20 to 25 WAR over the last 5-6 years. It's always, you took one guy that was awesome. And that's like, and the White Sox did that with Chris Sale and more recently with Tim Anderson. And I think the jury is obviously still out on Nick Hostetler's first round picks. But if you told me, that the Sox are a little bit better next year and then they make the playoffs in 2021, and you were to tell me that Zach Collins, Jake Berger, and Nick Madrigal were all contributors on that team, like I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. I just, I think stuff has happened. I think Zach Collins is going to see the big leagues this year. I think Nick Madrigal, after his wrist injury, is taking a little bit longer than people thought.
Hold on a second. How are we going to get Zach Collins in there when Wellington Castillo comes back and takes half of the at-bats? How are we going to get him in there?
I don't even think Wellington's the biggest problem. I think Yonder is.
He's a problem too, but I still haven't figured out why Wellington Castillo's getting half the at bats. That's still something I don't get that, the way that McCann has been hitting the ball. I know that everybody's like, well, he's not going to be a superstar, and I get it, but the guy's kind of earned a little bit more than a 50-50 split right now, I think.
Yeah, I think Wellington like catches Lopez. I think that's why. But
it's going so well for Lopez, isn't it?
Well, I also would think that the White Sox, since they don't spend any money, like they had to extract as much value as they could. So, right. I mean, I think they were hoping that they could trade Castillo and Yonder for anything, quite frankly. Like if somebody would eat the money and give them some C-level prospects, I think that was their dream. I think that ship has sailed. Nothing's going to happen until after the draft, obviously. But yeah, I mean, Zach Collins, there's not really much more for Zach Collins to do, like at Charlotte. I mean, Zach Collins is kind of showing you what he is. He's going to be a guy that a lot of people don't like because he's going to strike out a lot and he's going to walk a lot and he's going to hit a lot of homers. And a lot of people don't like watching that. And he doesn't swing that often. So, I mean, so
he just kind of sits back and waits for that pitch he's looking for.
Yeah. I mean, he's only going to swing if he can hit it. Now, I think that might help him in the majors. Whereas like, in the minors, there's really bad umpires and there's bad strike zones, and I think he struck out on a lot of times that he maybe wouldn't have at a higher level. But I mean, yeah, so we'll see. I mean, he's got adjustments to make, but I mean, he's a AAA. We're going to see him pretty soon.
You give me hope, James. When you say things like that, you give me hope, and that's good. I need hope here. I sit next to Negative Dave. When we do the podcast, he comes in here angry, slams his fist down on the bar, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? Sometimes I can't even figure out why he's angry. He just yells.
Well, if you watch all the major league games, it happens. That's people, and some people have said that, like, maybe I'm a bad fan. I don't know. I don't watch all the games. So now I DVR them and like kind of find out what happened, and then I'll go back and watch the games. Like right. I watch all the Giolito starts. I even thought like, oh, it's Memorial Day and it's a day game. Like maybe I should go down to the ballpark. And then I'm like, Ivan Nova, nope, not happening. So,
oh, maybe they'll have open pitching tryouts in July. We could get like a fan could pitch for a day. You know?
Yeah,
I mean, something.
Bad. They're hurting.
Yeah. One day Dylan Cease will be here. I know they're not going to rush him, but one day
Soon. It'll be
Cease will
sooner. It's going to be sooner than you think.
Hey, James Fox, he's from Future Sox. He's from Loop Sports. He spent a lot of time with us. I really appreciate it. And I hope the draft goes well, buddy.
Alrighty, I'll check in afterwards, and we can recap it in a week or so.
Definitely. I owe you a beer, too, next time we bump into each other at a game.
Sounds good. The best kind of beer is free beer, right?
That's right. Exactly.
Another show is wrapped up. Another show's in the books. Another show is wrapped up. And then by the looks, it's going to be a good one. And we'll see you next week. And the nude is basement. And the nude is basement. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. And it's in the books. Another show is wrapped up. Another show is wrapped up. And by the looks, it's gonna be a good one. Nudie's Basement. Broadcast Basement. The Nudie's Basement. The Broad Basement. Slancha. That was like Dropkick Murphys or something, right? I felt like it.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere a podcast can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.